In September 2020, we covered probably one of the biggest fan-made Star Wars games called Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic Apeiron. This was pretty much a full, from the ground up remake of Knights of the Old Republic 1, refusing to alter any of the storyline, updating all of the graphics, pretty much building a whole new engine. We talked about how close they were to finishing the project and releasing it to the public, but instead they got a cease and desist letter from Disney shutting down their entire project and refusing them to allow any form of distribution of their fan game. This was a devastating blow to an already heartbroken cult of fans for the original KOTOR series. At the end of the video, we kind of just pinned it down to Disney being really restrictive with their Star Wars IP. And unlike companies like, say, Sega, Disney really does not like their fans having any form of creative control over their own IPs. But in today's video, we're going to be diving into some extra bit of news that might actually change our opinions on why this game got cancelled. So before I jump into it, all I ask of you guys is to leave a like, it really helps us grow. And if you want more KOTOR news in the future, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you never miss any information about all things KOTOR and Star Wars alike. But with that all said and done, let's dive right into the video. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic Apeiron was created by a selection of very talented game developers that were not affiliated with Disney. And you can actually find some of this gameplay today. From character model updates to complete new map overhauls to even testing out how AI function within the game and how they live their lives, KOTOR Apeiron was pretty much almost a AAA style of game made entirely by fans. They got a cease and desist letter from Disney and they were tempted to fight back. And the reason for this was their main argument was the only way you can play this version of our fan-made game is that you actually need to own Knights of the Old Republic yourself. The game will not boot nor run unless you have that game installed in your Steam library. It's a pretty convincing case, but if we look back at what they exactly said about the cease and desist letter, not everything necessarily lines up. They stated the legal fight would take most likely a year if not more, and after speaking with legal counsel, the costs could go as high as $100,000. We all know that Apeiron's shutdown was a possibility. The best case scenario is that we get to finish this project, but the potential of shuttering was always on our mind. But that's what hurt the most. We were actually pretty close to releasing the game. It would have been easier to swallow if we had just started development, but in our current state, if we had maybe 3 more months, we probably would have been able to release it. So taking another look at this statement, the things that don't necessarily make sense is the legal ramifications of them countering the cease and desist by Disney. $100,000 in legal counsel is nowhere near enough to try and combat a cease and desist from a multi-million company. And not only that, if they did actually go ahead with it, they would 100% lose the opportunity of being able to publish their fan-made game. And we'll get into that a little bit later on in the video. As for the 3 more months statement, we didn't necessarily get to see much of the gameplay of Apeiron. The reason for this is because they were trying to keep it very hush-hush so they wouldn't actually get cease and desisted by Disney, but they still did. When you make fan-made games owned by companies that like to hold their IP with an iron fist, a very common practice is to develop it in secret and only announce your project when it is completed, because you run the risk of that company shutting you down before you even get off the ground. This is what happened to the classic Battlefront 3 project that fans were working on before EA and Disney collaboratively shut it down. But they had a reason for that. They had a competing product, Battlefront 2, on the current gen consoles at that time. So a fan-made project like Battlefront 3 on the PC could technically hurt their sales for the new current Battlefront 2 for PC, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So that makes quite a lot of sense, but we never really got the same reasoning for why Apeiron got shut down. They never really released a playable version to the public. It was very private and only handed off to a few content creators. But to counter this, they did release a lot of work in progresses on their social media accounts that probably caught the attention of Disney to then warrant them to shut it down. But the team behind KOTOR Apeiron made it very clear that you can't play this game unless you own the official version on Steam. When it turns out we do have a reason for this. For a few KOTOR fans living under a rock, an official Knights of the Old Republic is currently in development with SPIRE Media. We know this because insiders have revealed that the development cycle has just begun within the company, and its beginning of development sits very nicely in the timeline of when EA's exclusivity deal will end in 2023, meaning that by the time this game is finished and ready to be released, EA will have lost their contract and SPIRE Media will be able to release their first Star Wars game not under any form of EA exclusivity. But the official Knights of the Old Republic remake has just begun its development cycle. We just heard about this news just about a month ago. Why was Apeiron in the crosshairs all the way back in 2018 and 19? Well, that is where the timeline opens up a little bit more for us. It is very clear that the official Knights of the Old Republic remake was in pre-production probably all the way as early as 2017 or 18. For anybody who's not very familiar in game design, pre-production is pretty much all the planning stages of how a game is going to come together. This doesn't just cover storylines and how the game is going to play, it's all about new hires, bringing in the correct management for each department, and how they're going to go about starting a game from the beginning of production all the way to gold status, and then publishing the game digitally and physically. There's a lot of stages of communication between multiple teams to get this project put together, and during this very crucial pre-production period, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic Apeiron fell within the crosshairs of Disney. Believe it or not, Disney puts in a lot of money to figure out whether or not people want a new KOTOR game. And yes, whilst there is a lot of support and want for a new KOTOR game, you have to think about how niche that product actually is, and whether or not mainstream Star Wars fans are actually going to pick up the game and play it. And there is no doubt in my mind that Apeiron came into their sights during this research, which then warranted Disney to shut down the project to cease any form of competition from fans or publishers alike when they do decide to release this game. The last thing Disney wants is to release an official Knights of the Old Republic game and then everyone compare it to Apeiron. It'll hurt their sales, it'll hurt their reach in trying to convince people to buy the game, and the worst of it all is that Disney would then have to convince people to buy the official version of the game or buy the cheap Steam version and then just play a modded version instead. That will hurt their bottom line for sales of a new Knights of the Old Republic game. And that is why I believe Lucasfilm and Disney didn't even bother trying to get in contact with the Apeiron team, because they'll put themselves in a catch-22. The Apeiron team will ask why they're being cease and desisted, and there is no chance that PR teams are going to announce that they're, well, working on their own version. It would be silly to announce any form of game that is currently in pre-production and hasn't even hit a production cycle yet. Not to mention, that would accidentally reveal that EA has lost their exclusivity deal years ahead of when they're supposed to announce it. Remember, all of this went down in 2018, not 2020. So that is why Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic fans were left in the dark, including the fans that were developing the fan-made game. As for the KOTOR 3 project, we did do a separate video on that. That in itself is just a completely different situation. That was purely on the basis that the game was shelved during the process of Disney purchasing the Star Wars franchise. The same happened with Star Wars 1313, and it happened with KOTOR 3 as well. So don't confuse those two projects. The KOTOR 3 game was official and it was cancelled during transition to Disney, and the KOTOR fan game was cancelled for reasons we didn't know until today. So why am I making this video? Why am I retreading ground from all the way back in 2018 over official KOTOR news we got last month? Well, in the comments for the original video, named The Devastating Story of This Fan-Made Star Wars Game, many people shifted the blame onto EA and Disney, saying that they simply do not listen to their fans, that they're being tone deaf and just don't understand what their gamers want. The reason being is that Disney just simply couldn't tell us what they were working on until pretty much in 2021. You have to understand why the company was completely silent, because any form of information that they accidentally give out prematurely announced that EA had lost their exclusivity renewal. That has legal ramifications for both companies. So that is why Disney kept completely silent, and honestly, EA had nothing to do with this project anyway. I'm pretty much confident that probably EA didn't really care about this project because they weren't working on a KOTOR game themselves. But it also begs the question, is Disney really that stingy over fan-made Star Wars games? The two biggest examples is the Battlefront 3 remake and the Knights of the Old Republic Apeiron remake. And without being too crude, because I know this is going to upset a few people, Disney were absolutely in their right to cancel those projects. These two projects rely on existing games that are owned by Disney, and it can lead to conflict of interest and impact sales of those original games, even if you do decide that the game can't boot unless you have the original game. But it also highlights the idea that games like Star Wars Redemption, which we did cover last year as well, people like Annette, who is developing that game, is forced to go quiet because of the fears of the C&D that the other two projects have gotten, when in reality Star Wars Redemption is its own game in its own right. It doesn't interfere with any existing Star Wars games, it doesn't reuse existing assets from old cancelled games, and even doesn't involve any of the original characters from the Star Wars franchise. It's its own self-contained game through gameplay and story alike. And it's not just Annette and his Star Wars Redemption game. There could be plenty of fans that want to make their own Star Wars games but fear getting C&D'd, so they never bother. So I think these two examples have set a precedence that isn't strictly that true. Take a look at Unreal Cinema and his KOTOR fan animation. Whilst it's not necessarily a game, and thus doesn't really conflict with any existing products that are surrounding KOTOR, Lucasfilm actually approved his project. They were actually down with him finishing his animation and putting it out to the public. Imagine that, a complete contrast to what we've seen with Star Wars fan-made games. I do believe that precedence actually stands with games alike. The only difference being is that it's not conflicting with any existing products. So I do believe some of the fan-made games that we have covered on this channel are actually pretty safe, and they should release more work in progresses knowing that they're not going to be C&D'd. It was very clear Disney and Lucasfilm had a lot going on under the hood that expands all the way back in 2017 that forced them to shut down relative fan-made products and never give a reason why. But that is where I'm going to end the rant. This is where I'm going to pass the question over to you guys. I'm really interested in your thoughts and opinions. Many of you guys in the comments in our last video about this project stated that it was Disney just being absolutely cold, that EA are idiots, and that it was the developers' faults for putting too much work in progress out on their social medias. Now that you know this information, does your opinion change? Do you think that perhaps Disney just couldn't give us the information at the time because it was still in pre-production? Or do you think no, Disney is still in the wrong? They should have told that Apeiron team why they were being C&D'd. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. I will certainly read all of them and try to get back to some of you as well. But with that all said and done, I've been Charlie, you've been watching X2, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.